It started with a voice so low I almost missed it, a shaky whisper cutting through the dry Wild West air. "Please don't, I'm begging you." I remember feeling my chest tighten the moment I heard it. There was fear in that voice, real fear. The kind that doesn't come from a simple warning. The kind that comes from someone who has already seen what happens next. But the rancher didn't stop. He didn't even slow down. He stood there, tall and stubborn, brushing dust from his jacket like the words meant nothing. His boots scraped the ground as he stepped forward, ignoring the man who was practically on his knees. I kept waiting for him to turn around to at least hesitate, but he didn't. He just kept moving as if he had already made up his mind. And that's when everything inside me shifted. That strange mix of curiosity and dread. You know the feeling when you already know something terrible is about to happen but you can't look away. The stranger's voice cracked. "Please don't." Still, the rancher reached out his hand. Still, he touched what he was warned not to. And the instant he did, he froze. His shoulders tightened. His breath caught. A moment later, his whole body started to shake, not the kind of shake you get from the cold, but the kind that takes control of you. The kind you can't fight. As a viewer, I felt my heart drop. What did he touch? Why did that man beg so desperately? And why didn't the rancher listen? Life on that ranch never looked dangerous from the outside. It was the kind of place people in town talked about with calm voices. Wide fields stretching farther than the eye could see. Quiet mornings. Slow afternoons. Even the wind moved gently, brushing over the dry grass like it didn't want to disturb anything. If you asked anyone, they would say the ranch was peaceful, safe, predictable. But that was only true if you didn't live there. The rancher did, and he knew every corner of that land like the lines on his palms. He woke before the sun most days, stepping out into the cool air with his sleeves rolled up, ready to work from the first light. That was who he was. A man who believed in doing things himself, fixing things himself, and trusting no one but himself. People respected him for that. Some feared him for it, but no one questioned him. He wasn't cruel, just made of stone, hard to move, hard to convince, hard to shake. And over the years, that stubbornness shaped everything around him. His ranch looked clean, strong, cared for. His horses were trained well. His fences stood straight. Even the land itself seemed to obey him. But lately, a few things had started to feel off. Not broken fence posts or missing cattle, those were normal problems. This was different, and even if he didn't admit it out loud, he felt it too. Little things, small things, things easy to ignore at first. A patch of earth turned over when no animal had been there. Hoofprints that didn't match any horse he owned. Wooden posts with thin scratches down the sides as if something sharp had pressed against them. A faint smell in the air some mornings, metallic, cold, out of place, like the scent of wet iron. He would wrinkle his nose and shake it off, telling himself it meant nothing. And every time he brushed these things away, I felt that small twist in my stomach. The one that says, "No, something's wrong." Because I've seen enough stories to know when the ground is trying to speak. The rancher didn't listen to those signs. He had lived too long believing the land belonged to him, that nothing could surprise him, nothing could scare him. But the land had its own secrets. Still, the rancher went about his days like nothing unusual was happening. He tended to the livestock, checked the water troughs, repaired a loose board here or there. He ate lunch at the same time, walked the same trails, counted the same herd. Routine was safety to him. Routine meant control, and he needed that feeling more than anything. But even then, even in the middle of his predictable days, odd little moments kept slipping through the cracks. Once, he heard a sound from the far edge of his property. Something between a whistle and a groan. He stopped, listening. The air held still, waiting. Then everything went silent again. Too silent. Not the silence of peace, but the silence that watches. Another time, one of his horses refused to walk near the old cluster of trees behind the barn. It planted its hooves firmly, head raised high, breathing sharp and fast, eyes wide as if it saw something the rancher didn't. He slapped its side gently, told it to move, but it wouldn't. It trembled instead, and eventually he gave up, mumbling something about animals being sensitive to the cold. But it wasn't cold. The sun had been burning that day. I kept feeling it as I watched, this tension closing in, slow but steady. Like something creeping under the ranch, settling between the roots of the earth, waiting for its moment. And the rancher, with all his strength and pride, kept stepping right past the warnings. He didn't trust fear, not even the quiet kind. People in town had noticed changes too. They whispered about strange lights seen late at night near the ranch. They mentioned odd noises echoing across the open fields. They wondered if the rancher had heard anything. But when they asked him directly, he just gave them that strong look of his, the one that shut down conversations fast. They didn't push further. Nobody ever pushed him. But I kept watching him carefully, noticing how his jaw tightened whenever someone mentioned those rumors. He didn't like admitting he was unsettled. For a man like him, fear was a weakness, and weakness was unacceptable. Yet it was clear something had begun to unravel in the shadows of his land. You could feel it in the wind sometimes, in the way the birds didn't fly near a certain part of the ranch anymore, in the way the ranch dogs paused before crossing certain paths. They would look toward the same spot, ears low, bodies tense, before turning away quickly. That should have been enough to make the rancher question things. But no, he had lived too long believing he could outstare anything. Still, deep down, he sensed the shift. He just didn't want to face it. He spent more time walking the property than usual. Long, slow walks with his hands behind his back, boots kicking dust as he studied the ground. He didn't say it, but I could tell he was searching for answers. He just didn't know what he was looking for, or maybe he did, but he didn't want to name it. And the nights were getting worse too. The quiet wasn't peaceful anymore. It felt heavy, thick, like the darkness itself was watching him. Sometimes he woke up in the middle of the night, unsure why. The moonlight would pour through the window, and he'd just stand there, staring out into the far distance, eyes squinting, trying to see if something was moving out there. And every time, he returned to bed a little later, a little more bothered, a little less himself. But none of that prepared him for the moment when the stranger showed up. The man who carried fear in his eyes like a memory he couldn't escape. The man who looked like he had run for miles with something chasing him. The man who stepped onto the ranch with trembling hands and said the one thing the rancher never expected to hear: "Don't go to that place. Don't touch what's buried there. Please, I'm begging you." And that was the moment everything in me went still. Because something in the stranger's voice told me the rancher's quiet days were over. He showed up at the ranch the way bad news usually does: quiet, shaky, and unexpected. It was late afternoon, the kind of time when the sun hangs low and everything turns gold, soft, and calm. The rancher was finishing his work for the day, wiping sweat from his brow, thinking about dinner, thinking about nothing out of the ordinary. And then he saw a figure stumbling toward the gate. At first, he thought it was just another traveler passing through. People sometimes wandered across long roads in the Wild West, looking for water, shelter, or a place to rest their horses. But as the figure came closer, it became clear this man wasn't traveling. He was escaping something. His clothes were torn. Dust covered his shoulders. His steps were uneven, like each one took more effort than the last. When he reached the fence, he grabbed the top rail to hold himself up. His breathing was rough. His eyes were wide, scanning the ranch as if checking whether something had followed him. The rancher didn't like strangers arriving this way. Usually he would call out with a strong, steady voice, asking who they were and what they wanted. But this stranger carried something in his expression that made the rancher pause. Fear. Real fear. The kind that sinks deep into a man's bones. The stranger tried to speak, but the words stuck. His throat moved, but only a dry sound came out. He swallowed hard and tried again. "Please," he whispered, barely loud enough for the rancher to hear. "Please don't go near that place." The rancher frowned. "What place?" he asked. The stranger looked around as if answering that question might call something out of the shadows. His gaze drifted toward the far edge of the land, toward that patch of earth the rancher had already felt uneasy about. His voice trembled. "The spot behind the trees," he said. "The one with the broken ground. Don't go there, don't look. Don't touch anything." His voice cracked. "Please, I'm begging you." The rancher stiffened. He didn't like being told what to do, especially on his own land, especially by someone he had never seen before. But even from where I watched, I could tell the stranger's fear wasn't fake. His hands were shaking. His breath rushed out in uneven bursts. He kept glancing over his shoulder as if expecting something to rise from the earth and drag him back. Still, the rancher wasn't someone who trusted fear. He believed fear made people exaggerate. He believed men in the Wild West often carried ghosts from their past, memories that made them see danger where there was none. So he studied the stranger with calm, skeptical eyes. "What happened out there?" the rancher asked, voice steady. "What did you see?" The stranger shook his head quickly. "I didn't see it," he said, voice cracking again. "I heard it. I felt it. The ground wasn't right. Something was buried there, something that shouldn't be." He swallowed and wiped the sweat from his brow. "I tried to cover it. I tried to hide it, but the land, it kept pushing it back up." The rancher's jaw tightened. "You buried something on my land?" he asked, suspicion rising like a slow-burning flame. The stranger's face twisted with regret. "I didn't mean to," he whispered. "I didn't have a choice." His voice lowered into a trembling breath. "It wasn't supposed to be found." The rancher stepped closer, boots kicking up dust, his shadow falling over the stranger. "What exactly did you bury?" The stranger backed up a step, clutching his coat as if protecting himself from the question alone. "I can't tell you," he said. "If I speak it out loud, it remembers, it listens." His voice grew thinner. "But whatever you do, don't open it, don't touch it." The rancher didn't answer right away. And as I watched him, I could see it, his pride starting to rise, his stubbornness taking shape. He didn't like fear controlling a man, and he definitely didn't like secrets. The stranger saw it too. He saw the resistance forming behind the rancher's eyes, and that terrified him even more. He dropped to his knees in the dirt, hands sinking into the dust, voice breaking completely. "Please," he begged, tears mixing with the dust on his face. "Don't go there, don't touch that box, don't do what I did." He looked up, eyes desperate. "You think you're strong. But this isn't about strength." The rancher shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't used to grown men crying in front of him. He wasn't used to desperation either. His world was made of logic and labor, not terror and trembling voices. "Stand up," the rancher said quietly, as if trying to regain control of the moment. "Tell me what's going on." But the stranger didn't stand. He shook his head, shoulders trembling. "You won't believe me," he said. "Not until it's too late." That line lingered in the air like smoke. I remember feeling a slow chill run down my own back as I watched. Not because of anything the stranger said directly, but because of how he said it, like a man who had already lost everything and knew no one would hear him in time. The rancher looked out toward the trees again, eyes narrowing, mind clearly working. He didn't like mysteries. He didn't like warnings without answers. And he certainly didn't like another man deciding what he should or shouldn't do on his land. But even then, even in that moment, I could see something shift in his expression, just for a second. A flicker of uncertainty, doubt, maybe even fear. Then it faded, replaced by that old, familiar stubbornness he wore like armor. "Tell me why I shouldn't go," the rancher said, voice firm. The stranger stared at him with eyes full of old nightmares. "Because," he whispered, "once you hear it calling, you'll never be able to unhear it." The rancher's breath tightened, even if he didn't show it. But the stranger wasn't done. He leaned forward, voice trembling with a warning that felt heavier than the dust around him. "And whatever is inside that box, it remembers the hands that open it." The rancher didn't respond. He simply stood there, silent and thinking. And in that silence, I felt the whole land hold its breath, waiting to see whether he would listen to the warning or walk straight toward the thing the stranger feared most. For a long moment, the rancher didn't move. He just stood there, staring at the trembling stranger, the dust swirling around his boots like the land itself was waiting for his decision. The stranger's warning hung in the air, fragile, desperate, almost unbelievable, and I could see something change in the rancher's expression. A tiny shift, a tightening in his jaw, a small spark in his eyes, not fear, curiosity. The most dangerous kind. Even from where I watched, I felt the tension start to swell. The stranger's fear was real, so real it seemed to stick to his skin. But the rancher, he didn't scare easy. And he never had patience for secrets, especially on his own land. The more the stranger tried to hide the truth, the more the rancher wanted to uncover it. That's who he was, stubborn, proud, shaped by years of living on rough land and harder choices. He believed every problem had a cause, every mystery had an answer, and every man, no matter how afraid, knew more than he was saying. So he stepped closer to the stranger, his voice calm but edged with steel. "What exactly did you bury?" he repeated. The stranger shook his head violently. "Don't ask me that, don't make me remember." The rancher exhaled in frustration, turning away for a second. His hands rested on his hips and he let out a low breath. I could practically hear his thoughts, the irritation, the suspicion, the unwillingness to accept such a vague warning. He hated things that didn't make sense. He hated being told don't. And he hated more than anything when someone tried to control him, especially on his land. That was when I knew he wouldn't let this go. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply made up his mind. Quietly, firmly, like a man who had already survived too much to be intimidated by shaky voices and hidden boxes. He stepped past the stranger, one slow step at a time. The stranger scrambled to his feet, panic flooding his face. "Where are you going?" "To see what you're so afraid of," the rancher replied without turning around. His tone wasn't angry, it wasn't even harsh. It was worse than that, it was final, solid, unshakable. The voice of a man who believed no danger existed that he couldn't handle. The stranger rushed in front of him, blocking the path like a last line of defense. His hands were trembling, his breath sharp and uneven, but he still stood there, as if stopping the rancher might be the one good thing he could do before whatever haunted him returned. "Please," he whispered again, "don't go there." His voice cracked. "You don't understand what's inside that ground." The rancher's gaze hardened. "Then tell me." The stranger pressed his lips together, eyes darting away. He couldn't or wouldn't. And that silence, that refusal, that was the final push. The rancher shook his head, stepping around the man. "I don't have time for riddles," he said. "If something's wrong on my land, I'll see it for myself." The stranger grabbed the rancher's arm in a sudden burst of desperation. "You think you can handle it, but you can't. It's not like anything you've ever known." The rancher pulled his arm away, not violently but firmly. "Let go," he said, and the stranger's hand fell back to his side. I felt the air shift then. Like the whole ranch took a slow breath, preparing for what was coming. Even the wind seemed to hush, the tall grass leaning in a certain direction, pointing toward that hidden spot behind the trees. The rancher started walking, not fast, not slow, just steady, purposeful. His boots pressed into the dirt, leaving deep prints behind him. The stranger followed a few steps, hands half reaching forward, unsure whether to pull him back or run away from the direction he was heading. "You don't know what you're doing," the stranger whispered behind him. "You don't know what it wants." But the rancher didn't respond. He kept walking, shoulders squared, head straight, eyes locked on the trees at the far end of the property. A place he had passed 100 times without a second thought. Now that small patch of land felt heavier, darker, like it had been waiting for someone to challenge it. And I felt myself lean forward, heart pounding a little faster, because I could see where this was going. The rancher wasn't the kind of man who turned back. Still, there was something unsettling about the way he moved. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It felt like something was pulling him. Like the warning had only made the mystery stronger, the urge sharper. The stranger stumbled after him, calling out, "It's not just a box." His voice cracked with raw fear. "It's not buried, it wakes." The rancher paused mid-step. Just a small pause, but enough for me to feel the tension crawl up my spine. He turned his head slightly. "Wakes from what?" he asked. The stranger shivered, eyes filling with something close to grief. "From whoever disturbed it," he whispered. "From whoever opens it." The rancher stared at him for a long moment, then turned away again, moving toward the trees. And as he walked, I could almost feel the land grow tighter beneath his boots. The soil seemed to shift subtly, the branches swaying without wind. Even the sound of birds in the distance softened, like the world was preparing for something it didn't want to witness. The stranger stopped following. His feet rooted into the ground, fear locking him in place. His voice dropped into a hoarse whisper. "It remembers the last person who touched it." His eyes followed the rancher's fading silhouette. "And it never lets go." The rancher didn't hear him, or maybe he did, but he didn't care. He took another step, and another, and another, heading straight toward the place the stranger begged him to avoid. A place the rancher would soon wish he had never set foot near. The walk toward the trees felt longer than it should have. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the tension tightening in the air like an invisible rope. Or maybe it was the way the rancher didn't look back even once. Not when the stranger called out. Not when the wind shifted. Not when the land itself seemed to press in around him. From where I watched, every step felt heavier than the one before it. The ground didn't look different at first, just dirt, grass, old roots twisting under the surface. But something about the air felt wrong. Too dry, too still. Like the breeze was holding its breath. Even the birds avoided the area overhead, circling far away, wings beating fast. The rancher reached the line of trees, their branches bent low, forming a crooked arch. He stopped underneath it, scanning the shadows. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. Yet there was a tension there, a quiet pressure, like the space itself was watching him. He pushed aside a branch, its dry leaves rustling softly, and stepped into the deeper part of the grove. The smell hit him first, faint, sharp, metallic, the same scent he had ignored for weeks. Wet iron, cold stone, something that did not belong in warm, open land. He followed the scent until he saw it. A patch of ground turned over. Not recently, but not old either. The soil looked disturbed, almost bruised, as if something underground had shifted, pushing upward. The earth was cracked in thin lines, forming shapes that didn't look natural, curved patterns, sharp angles, almost symbols. The rancher kneeled down, pressing his hand into the dirt. It felt colder than it should, and deeper, like the earth wasn't solid beneath his palm anymore, but hollow. He frowned, brushing more dirt aside, and that's when he saw the rope, thin, frayed, half buried under the soil. Something tied underneath it, something wooden. The stranger's warning echoed in my mind. "Don't touch what's buried there." But the rancher ignored it. He dug his fingers into the ground and pulled the rope, lifting a small wooden box from the earth. Dust and soil spilled off its sides. The box was old, older than anything else on that ranch. The wood was dark, almost black, with carvings etched into its surface. Not words, not letters, symbols. Strange ones that curled and bent in unnatural ways. The rancher stared at the box, turning it slowly in his hands. The symbols felt familiar in a way he couldn't explain, like something he once saw in a dream long ago but forgot the moment he woke. He tilted his head, examining it closer. Behind him, branches cracked quietly. The stranger had followed after all, only close enough to see, too afraid to step any deeper. "Don't open it," the stranger called out, voice hoarse with terror. "Please don't." The rancher didn't even look back. His thumb traced the carved edge of the box, feeling the groove of every line. The wood was cold, far too cold for the warm day. He pressed his fingers along the rope and found the knot, tight, carefully tied, like someone had hoped it would never be undone. His curiosity sharpened. He tugged the knot. The stranger cried out, stumbling forward. "Stop! You don't understand. If you open it, it hears you." The rancher's jaw tightened. "Hears me? It's a box," he muttered, shaking off the warning. His fingers worked the knot loose. The rope fell away. The box vibrated faintly under his palms. I felt my breath catch as I watched. That wasn't imagination. It wasn't wind. The box moved, shuddered just once, like something inside shifted. The rancher brushed dirt from the lid. The metallic smell grew stronger. The air grew colder. And then, without hesitation, he placed his thumbs on the edge of the lid and lifted. The moment the lid opened, the world seemed to snap. A sound echoed through the grove, not loud, not sharp. A soft hum like breath drawn in for the first time in centuries. The rancher's shoulders jerked. His eyes widened. His body stiffened. He froze. His breath halted mid-chest, trapped like a stone pressed inside him. His fingers locked in place on the box. A faint tremor ran up his arms, small at first, then stronger. The stranger collapsed to his knees behind him, clutching his head, murmuring something under his breath, something broken. No, no, not again. The rancher tried to breathe, tried to speak, but the sound wouldn't come. His whole body trembled as if a cold hand had wrapped around his spine and squeezed. His eyes darted wildly, trying to understand what he was seeing inside the box. But from where I watched, all I saw was darkness inside it. A darkness that wasn't empty, a darkness that felt alive. His fingers spasmed. His arms shook harder. His legs wobbled under him. The trembling grew, racing through every muscle in his body. He gasped, choking on air that suddenly felt too thick to pull in. Still holding the box, his knees buckled. He sank into the dirt, shaking so violently the box rattled in his grip. The stranger cried out, covering his ears as if the shaking itself made sound. The rancher's eyes widened further, fear flooding into them for the first time since the stranger arrived. His lips parted, shaping a word he didn't manage to say. His body continued to shake, and shake, and shake. The box remained open in his hands. Something inside that darkness had woken, and the rancher had touched it. The rancher stayed on his knees, shaking so hard the dirt trembled beneath him. His fingers clung to the open box like they were glued to it, like something inside held them tight. The air around him seemed different now, thicker, colder, almost humming with a low vibration that crawled along the ground. I could feel it even from where I watched, like the whole place was holding its breath. The stranger stumbled closer, each step slow and painful, as if the weight of what was happening pushed him back. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. I told you not to touch it," but the rancher didn't answer. He couldn't. His jaw twitched uncontrollably, teeth clicking together as the shaking grew worse. His eyes were locked inside the box, wide and wild, following something I couldn't see. Not the dirt, not the wood, something else that moved in that darkness. The stranger sank beside him, trembling nearly as badly. He reached out a shaky hand but pulled back before touching the rancher's shoulder, fear stopping him. He whispered, "It knows you now, it sees you." The rancher's breathing was ragged, harsh, broken. A thin stream of air fought through his throat, but it wasn't enough. His chest rose and fell in frantic bursts, like his lungs were trying to outrun whatever force clung to him. I watched his fingers flex, curl, stretch, every motion jerky, unnatural, as though they no longer belonged to him. The stranger pressed both hands to his face, hiding his eyes for a moment before he forced himself to look again. "I buried it," he said in a voice so thin it could break. "I tried to keep it hidden. I thought maybe the earth would silence it, but the earth doesn't want it either." The rancher blinked fast, as if trying to wake himself from a nightmare. His head jerked to the side, then forward again. His mouth moved, shaping a word that didn't come out. His whole body rocked with every tremor, his shoulders jumping, his arms twitching. A slow, cold realization sank into me. He wasn't just shaking, he was responding to something, something only he could hear. The stranger leaned close, tears streaking through the dust on his cheeks. "It whispers," he said. "You can't escape once you hear it. It holds on. It remembers the voices that open it, and now it remembers yours." The rancher let out a broken, guttural sound, half breath, half cry. His head fell back, eyes wide to the sky as if searching for something beyond help. The stranger grabbed the box with shaking hands, trying to pull it away, but the moment he touched it, he recoiled as if burned. "It won't let go," he choked out. "Not once it chooses." The rancher's hands were still locked on the box. His knuckles turned white. His arms shook so violently his elbows scraped through the dirt. His breath hitched again, then again, each gasp shorter than the last. Whatever lived inside that darkness wasn't letting him go. A soft sound rose from the box. Not a hiss, not a growl, a whisper so faint I wasn't sure I heard it, but the rancher heard it. His entire body jolted. His eyes snapped downward again, staring straight into the open box. "What is it saying?" the stranger whispered, voice cracking. "What does it want from you?" The rancher's lips quivered. I could see him trying to form a reply, but the shaking made every attempt impossible. His fingers twitched against the box's edges as if something inside was pulling at them, guiding them, claiming them. The stranger reached out once more, desperate enough to risk touching the box again. "I'm sorry," he said through tears. "I'm so sorry. I should have destroyed it. I should have." Before he could finish, the rancher lurched forward, the box nearly slipping from his hands. A violent tremor ran through him, stronger than before, so strong it knocked him sideways. He fell onto his shoulder, still gripping the box. The stranger shouted his name, grabbing at him, trying to pull him upright. But the rancher wasn't responding anymore. His body was trembling so fast it looked unreal, almost impossible. The whispering grew louder, not in volume but in presence. It felt like it filled the space, sinking into every crack of the earth, every trembling leaf on the trees. The rancher gasped, one single breath sharp and painful, and then the shaking slowed, not stopped, just shifted, softened into a steady, unnatural rhythm that looked nothing like fear and everything like surrender. The stranger froze. His eyes widened. He whispered, "No, don't let it take you, fight it, please." But the rancher's eyes were empty now, still open, but empty, as if something else had stepped inside their place. His hands loosened around the box. Not enough to drop it, just enough to show he wasn't holding it anymore. It was holding him. And when he finally spoke, barely a breath, barely a sound, it wasn't his voice. His lips moved in a rhythm that didn't match his trembling body, forming words that didn't belong to this world, words that didn't belong to him. The stranger stumbled backward, horror twisting his face. "Oh God," he whispered. "It's talking through you." The rancher's shaking suddenly stopped. Not slowly, not gently, all at once. He rose to his knees, stiff, mechanical, as if pulled up by invisible threads. The box stayed open in his hands. The air around him felt colder than ever, pressing into the trees, sinking into the ground. The whispering stopped. The rancher lifted his head. His eyes weren't his eyes anymore. They stared straight ahead, empty, unblinking, filled with something dark and ancient. The stranger took one step back, then another. And the rancher finally spoke again. His voice was flat, low, too calm. "It remembers you too." The stranger froze. His face drained of color, because the rancher wasn't looking at the box anymore. He was looking at him.